people my generation, the first sort of tournaments that they think of with Scotland would have been Italia '90, and then most people that when they're recalling Scotland look at France '98 because we played the opening game against Brazil, and then when we played in Euro '96, that gets brought up a lot because we played England, and that has the usual goal or race failure novel. But Euro '92 doesn't get mentioned too much when you speak to people, not in the media. They don't really recall it that much. And when you consider the teams that we were up against, you're up against the world champions in Germany, the European champions in Holland, and the Euro 8 runners-up in, was USSR, but also was CIS for that tournament before the breakup. It was, and we played really, really well in all three games. We played above ourselves, and arguably we were unlucky not to qualify for the semi-finals. So I just think it's a fascinating tournament. It doesn't get talked up often enough, and that's why I want to bring this story to light. I've always been passionate about writing. I did at one point in my life want to become a journalist, and then I saw the direction it was going, and I thought I'll stay clear. But I've always kept my hand in it. I've kept my writing up for the famous Tartanama magazine, and writing blogs for the Scottish Football Forums podcast, and so I've always kept my hand in it, and obviously raising my two children, Callum and Henry, who's at nursery today, with my wonderful wife Suzanne. I don't know where I find the time, to be honest. But no, it's just something I've always been passionate about, and when the opportunity came to write a book, I thought I could have a go at this and make a success of it, and we'll see how it goes now.
What surprised you about your research into the book? You obviously had a ground knowledge of it before you went about it. What was the great surprise that came out of it?
Well, there's quite a few, because you got to remember I was 11 at the time of Euro '92, so all I really recall was the matches. But finding out all the the ins and outs behind it, and some of the squad selections that were going on throughout the qualifiers was quite interesting. Like, for example, I didn't know when I was doing the research that Jim Leighton was actually in the first squad against Romania, because I thought after Italia '90 he was gone for 3 years from the Scotland team, but he was in that first squad, but didn't make the bench, and then wasn't in for a few years, so that surprised me. Stephen Wright, the Aberdeen player, was actually named in the initial 20-man squad, but had to pull out with a wrist injury, and sadly it was a bit of a sliding doors moment for Stephen. It was interesting that 3 under-21 players were actually called into that squad. Alan McLaren, Wright unfortunately withdrew, and Duncan Ferguson, of course. People forget Duncan Ferguson played in that tournament. So those sort of things really surprised me. And yeah, there was just, I think that was probably the main thing, with some of the squad selections that were going on at that time, to be honest.
It was an extraordinary time for the national team. I can remember coming along here in 1973 and Joe Jordan scoring, and the delirious delight of going to a major tournament. It was the first one since 1914, and we're now sort of after that it was regular World Cups and of course this European tournament as well. We're now in a little drought again. Hopefully ended. Where do you think Andy Roxburgh and indeed Craig stand in that pantheon then of making it so almost routine that we qualified when qualification was really tough? I mean, there's only 8 teams qualified for this tournament.
Yeah, I think Andy Roxburgh is grossly underappreciated in Scottish football terms in my eyes. I think a lot of people have two perceptions. Like, when he got the job, it was a case of, to the general public, Andy who? Because not many people knew about his background, about the fact he'd been in the SFA for a good number of years, that he'd led under 20s team to victory in the European Championships in '82, and then qualify for the World Cup in Mexico as well, when Steve Clark scored in front of 80,000, 100,000 people in the Azteca. But people just jumped on the perception, Andy who is he? We don't know who he is, and almost judged him from there. And a lot of people judge Andy Roxburgh as well on his final year, the World Cup '94 qualifying year, which didn't go particularly well, unfortunately. And I think if Andy had the choice at that time, you probably would have left after 92 and a high. But of course, this is back in the day, long before big payoffs. You don't get the multi-million pound payoffs these days that you do these days. But we got to Italia 90 and played very well. Yes, Italia 90 wasn't great, but to then follow that by qualifying for a tour, as you say, only 8 teams. There was a better chance of qualifying for the World Cup. 14 European nations qualified for the World Cup in 1990, but then only 8 qualified for Euro 92, whereas now it's switched the other way, where half of Europe can basically get to Euros and it's 13 teams for the World Cup, and good luck to Steve Clarke on Wednesday. So, yeah, I think that achievement was wonderful to get to Euro 92, and it was something like, from your days in the media. It was almost taken for granted that we were qualifying, and when we qualified for first ever Euros, that should have been more historic, but it was more a case of, well, why wasn't this done before? So I think, Andy and Craig right now are top 2, without a question, and hopefully Steve Clarke can join them and make it an even better debate.
Great. And we were so near and so far in the qualifiers, because we were competitive, and you've talked about the pedigree of the 3 teams we were playing. We're playing, literally the top teams in the world in that tournament, and we were so near. If you can think of one player from the past in Scottish football, or even the present in Scottish football, that would have made a difference, who would you have chosen that could make the difference, maybe got us over that line?
I feel as though you'd be doing a disservice to the team in 92 because they did perform so well, and there were some good players who all played at good levels. I mean, Richard Gough was obviously a fantastic captain of that Rangers team of that era, and of course, I'm sure he won a UEFA Cup with Spurs as well.
I think he did, yep.
Yeah, so I mean, you had players like Goffey. Obviously, Dave was a great partner alongside him in central defence, and the two of them formed a great partnership. You had guys like Maurice Malpass who'd played in the European final. Stuart McKimmie won titles at Aberdeen. Paul McStay, of course, was a great midfielder at the time. But if you're asking me, what did we miss? It was especially games against Holland and Germany, and I wonder how they would have coped. The likes of Koeman and Buchwald would have coped against a guy like James McFadden, who could do the unpredictable and pull something out of nothing. So if you had to ask me right now, it would probably him, because he came alive in a Scotland jersey, produced some great moments. Maybe he would have done the difference in 92, who knows? But as I say, it would be doing a disservice to what was a great squad. What
was the major lesson then for Scotland from 92? What was, what did you feel that the national team and the nation took from it? There was a feeling that it was almost like the birth of the Tartan Army in a way as well. Certainly in terms of outstanding behaviour and ambience and atmosphere.
Yeah, play without fear was the take I got from it. A lot of teams would have looked at who we got and just would go in with a bit of trepidation. But this lot just looked at that Holland and Germany and thought, right, let's go for it. Let's bring it on. We've got nothing to lose here. We're the underdogs. Everyone out with this camp thinks we're going to get hammered in every game, and that didn't happen. Holland needed the intervention of 3 guys from a European Cup winning AC Milan side and an emerging Dennis Bergkamp to beat us. Germany needed a bit of class from Karl-Heinz Riedler, who was a top player at the time, and the luck of a deflected cross from Stefan Effenberg off Maurice Malpass's shin. So they definitely played without fear, and that's something that could definitely be brought in the modern day team, who I think are playing like that. And as for the Tartan Army, as you mentioned, it was almost a bit of a rebirth of them. That was the blueprint of how future campaigns were going to behave. This is the precedent that we are setting. When we go abroad, have a good time. Respect the locals. And just part away with them. And they also took a look at the English fans and how they were behaving and said, let's not be like them. Let's be the opposite. Let's show us in a greater light. And they were great ambassadors. Throughout that tournament. And I also spoke to quite a few fans, and their stories make this book as much as the former players and Andy and Craig, obviously.
What is your favourite anecdote from the book? I don't want to give away all the goods before people start buying it, but if you could hint at one.
Yeah, I want people to buy this. I'm not telling you all the story. Probably the stories from the fans and how they got to Sweden. There was a few interesting ones. Like there was one fan that put down that they went through 7 of the 8 countries. Obviously, Russia would have been a bit far, but they travelled from Scotland through England, through France, Germany, Denmark, on the way to Sweden. And it reminded me of a trip that me and a couple of my friends took from Cumbernauld to Amsterdam, which was a 20-hour bus journey, so I never wanted to again. So I could just imagine what these guys were doing in a bus for that length of time, going through all these countries. It would have taken them a couple of days. And obviously this is in the era before EasyJet and Ryanair cheap flights, basically. So it was interesting to see how people gone. There was people that got one of those Eurorail tickets that took them anywhere in Europe. In fact, some fans, a couple of these groups from the Beer Hunters Tartan Army, they they actually spent a night in Germany the night before we were due to play Germany, which I thought was interesting because Sweden was so expensive. So yeah, I think the Tartan Army tales are probably the ones that stand out quite a bit.
The book's full of great access and stories with the players as well, and as you mentioned, we're talking about really top players in this squad, and how were they? Were they receptive to your inquiries? And did they? I was talking to Dave before the game. Like the players have got a hugely different mindset from the rest of us, or certainly me. And that nostalgia is only nostalgia if you win. The players look back and things and say, "Well, could we have done better?" What was the reaction to the players to it?
Oh, they were great. The ones that I approached, I was open and honest about what I was doing, and they says that'd be great. I'll be happy to talk to you. In Dave's case, we've talked about his full career on the Scottish Football Forums podcast, but we spent a good bit of that podcast talking about Euro '92, and it just look back with great memories. Of course, they're going to look at play. Like Pat Nevin was one that wondered, had we got through us against Denmark, who knows, would have fancied our chances. But they were absolutely great, and they were happy to talk away to me and say some of the stories are good. Jim McInerney's got a really good one in there relating to some of the peculiar bets that they were having. So this is also pre-Bet365, and they were betting them not just the games, but betting on who's going to pick their noses first and things like that. Don't you do that, Callum?
I would be surprised, knowing Jim McNally, I would be surprised if we didn't have a good story. One moment from the tournament, one moment from the Scottish journey that sticks with you. I mean, I know you were only 11 at the time, but in revisiting it.
I think my favourite, there was a video that came out not long after it called Scotland a Tribute. It was narrated by the late Ian St John. And there was a particular scene where the bus stops at a campsite and the players all go and talk to the fans. And I think that says everything about them. The players just loved the fact that Tartan Army were there, the Tartan Army were great with them, and the fact that they stopped, that was unprecedented then, and I don't think it's really been done since. I mean, I know the players are relatable to fans these days, in the Scotland squad these days, but could you imagine Steve Clarke saying, yeah, let's just stop here in Cardiff and speak to the fans before we go and play this game on Sunday, hopefully. So it would, I mean, that was just wonderful, and it just showed the camaraderie, between them and the mood amongst the cab. And then obviously we got a great 3-0 win over CIS to round off the campaign and knock them out. They were getting a bit cocky. Mikhailichenko's, doing the champagne popping, mimics at McCoy's and McCall, and then we beat CIS 3-0 that night, and Dave sets up the first goal for Paul McStay. Now, is it a Paul McStay goal or is it an own goal? I think the dubious with the panel these days, but they gave it to McStay, so it's his goal. And it was just a great way to round off. And then you've obviously got the image of the players in front of the fans at the end of the game to say thank you. Fans and Players United, just wonderful.
I'm going to open it up in a few minutes, just after the next question. If anybody wants to ask questions from the floor, well, Callum's already. He's going to ask if his pocket money gets increased. This is not the forum. This is not the forum to look for a rise, Callum. Or maybe it is. Imagine being absolutely exhausted with 2 children, a job, and trying to write a book. Would you consider another one? And what would be your subject?
I would consider another one, definitely. Probably look at Euro 96 next, is something I've got in my mind. I haven't ironed out details yet, but that's probably going to be next. But I'd like to do another couple over the years. I think I've got the bug for it, and I've had the good reception of it, and I think I could, with the things that I've learned, I'd probably take a bit longer to do it this time. 7 months with 2 kids was hard work, but I managed to get it done. I'm proud of what's come about.
And so you should be. I can unreservedly recommend it. Smashing book.
Thank you.
Open up if anybody wants to ask a few questions. We don't want to go on all afternoon, but there's certainly some time for if anybody like a question. Sir?
I wonder if you could give us an explanation of the qualifying campaign, because I don't think it's one of these things I've tried to look at myself and work out how we actually managed to qualify, and especially with that stitch up of that last game was between Bulgaria and Romania.
Yeah.
So I just wondered if you could enlighten us regarding it.
Yeah, the qualifying campaign's interesting because we're in a group of 5, and you had San Marino making their first appearances in the tournament, and we saw how they were going to do in future years because they get beaten every game. But the rest of the games were so tight. It was ourselves, Romania were the top seeds, who were a good side that did well in Italia 90. There was Switzerland were actually 4 seeds, but they had some very good players. You know, they had Stefan Chapuisat and Adrian Knoop up front and Alan Suter in midfield. They were a very good side. And Bulgaria obviously had Stoichkov. And those 3 teams went on to do very well at USA 94. You know, Switzerland reached the last 16, Romania reached the last 8. Bulgaria famously, of course, were fourth in the whole tournament. So when you look at that, it's actually amazing that we managed to qualify for the Euros ahead of those teams. And as you mentioned, Kevin, the last game, because for some reason Scotland, after they beat San Marino here, which was my first ever Scotland game, Stan's changed a bit since then. So for some reason Scotland had to wait a week to find out the outcome of Bulgaria versus Romania, and basically anything other than a Romania win saw us through. Jock had an interesting tale about getting called in to do commentary and got the teams through an hour and 5 minutes after the game kicked off. So, but fortunately his experience of covering previous matches managed to just about get him through, even though it was downpouring the rain and blonde hairs became black, etc. But yeah, that 1-1 draw was what got us through, and the happiest man in that stadium was Andy Roxburgh, because he was obviously there in Sofia.
Anybody else? So
maybe not 100% the point, but I believe there's quite a good argument for the case that Scots introduced football to Sweden. Was there any kind of awareness of that during the tournament?
I wasn't really aware of that. I mean, they certainly were popular with Scotland, Sweden in that tournament because they knocked England out thanks to Thomas Brolin. And there was a Thomas Brolin party, I believe, that some of the players attended. So, after the CIS game. So yeah, Sweden were certainly popular with Scotland, we were popular with them. So but whether we taught them a game, I think, let's be honest, if we look at the history further, we taught England the game.
we taught everybody the games as a ball.
We just forgot what we do now.
We gave it to them. They gave the world the game. We're just waiting for the world to give us it back. You know, hopefully
they've taken our ball.
Yeah, hopefully that'll come on Wednesday night. Anybody else like to ask something, sir, in the corner?
For those of us who grew up in another country, what was the general sort of feeling towards the tournament? Was there, sort of in the media, was there much confidence going in? Did you think you'd do well, or was there more of a here we go again?
I think the media were just of the acceptance that we're up against the European champions and the world champions. That, you know, if we got anything, it would be a massive bonus. I think a lot of people were surprised that we got the victory in the final game, because people were expecting us to lose all 3, and they were delighted. And see, when you think about it, in an 8-team tournament, Scotland were 5th. I mean, so effectively we were the 5th best in Europe when you look at it that way. Could you imagine that? Scotland, the 5th best team in Europe. But it was... yeah, I think the media reacted very well to the performances. I think they just acknowledged that they gave everything. You know, it wasn't like in previous tournaments we lost to like Costa Rica and drew with Iran and lost to Peru, or they were coming home in disgrace, that kind of thing. That wasn't the case this tournament. No, this tournament, there was a recognition that they gave everything. And from what I believe, certainly external, there wasn't much media scandal amongst the players, which disappoints the guys like you, try to sell papers. But no, the behaviour of players and fans was exemplary. I think that's what makes it special as well.
Anybody else? Oh, there's one. Callum. Right, okay, right.
Can I make a speech?
Go for it.
Okay.
So I want to say thank you to my dad, John Bleasdale, because sadly Sweden had to join something to protect Ukraine because of this Russia war, and also Finland joined it as well. So I want to say thank you to John Bleasdale.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can safely say, Callum, this is the first time as a sports journalist that the membership of NATO has ever come across my. It's okay. No, it's fine. You don't need it. It was a wonderful speech, and it was very sincere. I wonder if anybody else got time for maybe a couple more. My friend.
A connoisseur in football, but isn't one of the issues that makes this tournament significant, John, that it was on the cusp when the UEFA Champions League took over, so to speak, and that we moved, in some ways seamlessly onto a much more European club games, and what went with that really, and that it's unlikely the same kind of focus would be on what was the Nations Cup in a sense.
Yeah, I mean the whole of Europe was changing at this point. When the draw was made, there was 35 recognised UEFA nations. Obviously Sweden qualified as host, and then Germany and West Germany merged, which actually proved to be an exception rather than the rule, because Yugoslavia, as we know, broke up prior to the tournament. Denmark are thanking them to this day. Russia obviously broke up. And now we're looking at 55 UEFA nations, looking for 24 places. So it's amazing how it's expanded, and I know there's a lot of focus in the club game these days. I mean, that first Champions League season, of course, only 8 teams in that one, and now now you get too many, in my view. But yeah, it was amazing how the landscape of Europe changed forever, that tournament, and even little rules changed. Now, back then you could pick up the pass back. It was the last tournament before the pass back was you have to kick it when it's passed back to you now. So it's amazing how much has changed from then. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
John, I'm similar ages with yourself, and my favourite player during Euro '92 was Stuart McCall. I was just wondering if you had a favourite player from that team.
That's a good question, Cam. You put me in the spot. Well, obviously being an Aberdeen fan, Stuart McKimmie was one of my favourites. I still can't believe he was given the number 9 jersey though, and Alan McCoist was number 5. Yeah, I like Stuart McCall as well. He had a great attitude in the Scotland jersey, and obviously Alan McCoist was a great player at that time. Yeah, it's hard to pick one. But I'll say Dave just now because he's in the audience.
I was nudging you towards that. Final question.
Yeah.
Sir.
It's almost a follow on from who was your favourite player. You said, John, that you don't believe that the tournament got the credit it deserved from a Scottish perspective. Who would you suggest, or which body of people would you suggest, gave the biggest contribution to the tournament? Not as Stuart McKimmie, because he comes from your favourite club team, but it could be a player, it could be a manager, it could be the media or whoever. Was there a standout contribution that made the tournament what it was for you?
Oof, are you talking about from a Scottish perspective?
Yes, from a Scottish.
Right, okay.
Apart from Thomas Brolin, which I heard getting shouted at the back.
That's hard to name just one. I mean, I suppose if you're going to have to say one, we're going to have to say Andy Roxburgh. He's the man that got us there at the end of the day. Because you've got to remember the European Championships beforehand were used mainly as, build-ups for the next World Cup, putting the building blocks in place for the next World Cup. Whereas the mentality changed after the Italian 90s that we've got to try and get to these Euros. Because the Euros were starting to expand around about that point. Euro 84 got good feedback, and Euro 88 was also made more of a big deal. But Euro 92 was where it, maybe because I'm of that age and this was my first years, this is where it started to really kick off. And Andy's the one that got us there. Andy took on all the criticism from the media head on. There was fallouts along the way with certain people. There was one with Steve Nicol, which I didn't know about. But whenever some players moved on, other ones came in. But I think it says a lot. It says a mark for Roxburgh that it was well known that he didn't have a great relationship with Richard Gough, but he still made him his captain. And his quote was, "I don't want yes men, I want the right." There will be times where we disagree, but it'll be about football. And the fact that he was able to put that personal issues to one side for the benefit of the team, recognise that Richard was the man for the job and made him captain, I think was great. It was a shame what happened nearly a year later, but having spoken to Richard myself, there's obviously the famous photograph of the two of them with the fans behind them. And Richard says he's still got that picture in his house somewhere. And I think that says a lot for Richard as well as Andy.
Right, thank you everyone for coming along today. As I say, will you be sitting here, John, for the books, signing the books?
Yeah, I'll sit here, and as promised, we do have a wonderful cake made by my wonderful wife Suzanne. Which is in the shape of the book. So I know there's a lot of people here for the cake, not the book. So
it's a final interjection from Callum.
Yeah.
I thought you were not. You okay?
I'm okay.
Right.